Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. It's Thursday the 8th of May. Apologies for the late start this evening. My name is Brian Liddy and this evening we're joined by Maureen Watt, President of the Scottish National Party. Good evening, Maureen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I hope you are too.
Yeah, thank you for your patience with us in this late start and for joining us this evening. So, the Middle East update. At least 52,760 Palestinians have been killed and 119,260 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. That's according to the Gaza Health Authority. A new US-made documentary has produced evidence pointing to the identity of an Israeli soldier who shot dead the Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in 2022. The documentary, Who Killed Shireen, concludes that a member of the Devon Israeli Special Forces unit shot Abu Akleh while she was reporting for Al Jazeera in Jenin in the West Bank. The documentary, made by the Zeteo media organisation, sets out not only to identify the soldier responsible for the journalist's death, but also to show the failure of the US government to hold the Israeli military to account. Ireland's public broadcaster has asked that the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, for a discussion about Israel's inclusion as in the Eurovision Song Contest, as 72 former contestants called for the Israeli broadcaster to be banned from next week's event in the Swiss city of Basel. The Director General of Ireland's RTE, Kevin Backhurst, said in a statement on Wednesday that he was appalled by the ongoing events in the Middle East and by the horrific impact on civilians in Gaza and the fate of Israeli hostages. Maureen, are you maybe surprised that the Eurovision Song Contest has crept into today's update?
No, I'm not. I'm sure it has done before. I'm sure it did last year as well, maybe. Um, and yeah, I think it's dreadful that they're being allowed to participate. I hope even at this late stage they will be asked to withdraw from the contest. I mean, I suppose it's symbolic more than anything else, but it is Eurovision. They have been part of it for years, but I do think if we don't take a stand, where we can, then I think opportunities are lost to make a point. And I think Israel should not be in the Eurovision Song Contest this year. And I agree with all the participants who have said likewise.
Thank you, Maureen. Now, today's Ukraine update. Today is the 1170th day of the war in Ukraine. The period of an unagreed ceasefire called for by Vladimir Putin began on Thursday morning as the Russian president seeks cover for Victory Day events. Ukraine has dismissed it as a game designed to protect Putin's parade rather than a genuine step towards peace. Foreign leaders, including China's Xi Jinping, are visiting the Russian capital for Victory Day celebrations. Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's president, has offered a 30-day ceasefire as suggested in US brokered talks, but the Kremlin has refused. The Kremlin was forced on Wednesday to say it was taking all necessary measures to ensure the safety of foreign leaders due to attend its flagship 9th of May parade after days of Ukrainian drone attacks closed airports across Russia and disrupted about 350 flights due to carry about 60,000 people. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said authorities were jamming the internet because of the drone threat. As long as guests are here until the 10th of May, we need to be ready for restrictions, he added, calling on Muscovites to be understanding. Ukraine's own airspace has been closed ever since the Russian full-scale invasion began in February 2022. Hours before Putin's self-declared ceasefire was set to come into effect, Moscow unleashed a barrage of drone attacks across Ukraine. Ukraine's Air Force said Russian aircraft targeted the northeastern Sumy region with guided air bombs after the ceasefire was supposed to begin. Earlier, Zelensky said a Russian attack killed a mother and her son in Kyiv on Wednesday. A Russian drone attack also wounded 4 people in the southern city of Zaporizhia, Ukraine's national police said. Zelensky appeared to acknowledge the drone attacks that have been targeting Russian sites, including the city of Moscow, disrupting the build-up to Victory Day. It is absolutely fair that Russian skies, the skies of the aggressor, are also not calm today in a mirror-like way, he said. Ukrainian long-range drones reportedly hit two military-industrial targets in Russia on Tuesday. The basalt plant in Krasnoarmeysk near Moscow, making weapons and ammunition for the Splav plant in Tula, producing multiple launch rocket systems and cartridges. Joe Biden has accused Donald Trump of modern-day appeasement in his approach to Russia and expressed fears that Europe would lose confidence in the certainty of America in his first interview since leaving the White House in January. He believes it is historical. Sorry, I'll start that again. He believes it has historical rights to Ukraine, Biden told the BBC. Anybody who thought the Russian president would stop if Kyiv conceded territory, as recently proposed by Trump, is just foolish, Biden said. A Russian drone is estimated to have inflicted tens of millions worth of damage to the €1.5 billion radiation containment around the destroyed reactor at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The cost of a full fix is likely to be borne by Western governments, including the UK, because initial estimates are that a complete repair will cost more than the €25 million available in a special international contingency fund. Maureen, I wonder, which do you think is more concerning, the Chernobyl needing repaired or President Trump being... the word appeasement being used in relation to Trump and the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think Trump's attitude towards Russia is clearly influenced by things that have happened to him as an individual in the past in Russia. I mean, I can't understand why, he of all people is so keen on appeasement with Russia as a US president. I mean, it's just, for the whole of the West, it just seems ridiculous. And he talks about peace, but yes, you can't have peace at any cost. And that's what Ukraine and its leaders are fighting against at the moment, really, is saying to the US, this is absolutely not acceptable. And the point about Chernobyl is really important. I mean, it seems a long time ago now, but it's still obviously a dangerous place to be near. And, Chernobyl even hit the Highlands of Scotland in terms of radiation. So it is a continuing worry. But, Ukraine seems to be going further and deeper into Russia and making more targeted strikes, like at airports and other targets. So what will happen if and when peace talks happen in the near future is going to be really interesting. But, I still think often about and I wanted to mention this, the children who were taken away out of Ukraine and have been, tucked away somewhere in the Soviet Union and getting brainwashed in Russia and getting brainwashed about how Ukraine has always been part of Russia, which, you don't need to be a very great historian to know that Ukraine has had a life of its own prior to the Soviet Union for many, I don't know whether it's centuries, but for a long, long time. It is an independent state and should remain an independent state.
Thank you, Maureen. And the next news tonight is that we have a new Pope. Robert Prevost has become the first American to lead the Roman Catholic Church, ending the Vatican's long-standing opposition to the idea of a pontiff from the United States. The 69-year-old from Chicago has taken the papal name Pope Leo XIV, a senior cardinal, announced from the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica this evening. The announcement, which followed white smoke billowing from the chimney above the Sistine Chapel, prompted raucous celebration and delight among the 50,000 pilgrims and tourists in St. Peter's Square. The smoke signalled to the world that a pope had been elected by at least two-thirds of the 133 cardinals inside the Sistine Chapel, where the conclave had been taking place. In a further confirmation that the conclave was over, the bells of St. Peter's Basilica then rang out. Prevost was chosen on the second day of voting after the fourth ballot, and he had been among the front-runners before the conclave. Others tipped for the papacy included Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's Secretary of State, Luis Antonio Tagle, a reformer from the Philippines, Peter Erdo, a traditionalist from Hungary, and Robert Serra, a cardinal from Guinea who criticised Francis's papacy. During one of the twice-daily pre-conclave meetings, the cardinals agreed that a new pope needed to be capable of being a bridge and a guide for a disorientated humanity marked by the crisis of the world order. So, Maureen, forgive me. Apparently this is one of the shortest conclaves ever. There was only 4 votes and 24 hours in total for them to come up with. Robert Prevost, he's also a Peruvian. He was born in America, but is a Peruvian citizen. And I'm just intrigued about the name that he's chosen, Leo, because apparently you can get a clue about what a pope is going to be like by who he names himself after. The first Pope Leo was on the papal throne from the year 400 to 461, and he was an aristocrat. And he met Attila the Hun, apparently, but he also caused a schism, but not for meeting Attila the Hun, that was for a different reason. The most recent Pope, Leo XIII, was Pope from 1878 to 1903, and he was an intellectual, apparently. I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to gather any thoughts about what you think the new Pope's going to be like.
Well, yes, it is interesting that there were only 4 ballots. I suppose since Pope Francis's funeral, the cardinals have been in Rome and have been able to have conversations, about who they thought they might have. So clearly there was a fair amount of consensus over this. As you said, Pope Leo was born in Chicago. I think I was going to say what I've forgotten. I think was he from the Augustan? I can't remember exactly. I thought he was. Yeah, I thought he was Augustan sort of wing. I suppose that's not the right word, but anyway, he might be Brotherhood. Yeah, so he has spent a lot of time in Peru, as you said, and in 2023, Pope Francis took him to the Vatican to help there. So he clearly knows about the running or the governance of the papal state, if you like, as well as having great experience in the ground in South America. Even although he is originally from Chicago, I would not say that he's on the same page at all as President Trump. And I think we will see a continuation of the work of Pope Francis, and it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with his papacy and whether he'll undertake visits and maybe even to Britain. So, I wish him well.
He's young for a pope, and a lot of people before the conclave were saying that it was time for an Italian pope. There hadn't been one since before John Paul II, and that you usually mean that they wanted a conservative pope. So we've got an American. There were 2 black cardinals classed among the front runners. But so do you think that by the time there's the next conclave, if he lives a long time, that we might have women cardinals getting ready to take part in the next conclave?
No, I
No.
don't. I can't
Okay.
see it. As you say, he's only 69, so he's got, hopefully he'll have a long reign as the Pope. But no, I can't see women cardinals being considered as popes in my lifetime. I think you're right about, we may see someone from the African continent or the Far East. Um, but I think the days of popes being Italian is probably over. And, there are a lot of people, cardinals in and around Rome and Italy, obviously. But I think France has appointed a lot of cardinals, and most of them, I think, were from countries far away from Italy.
Yeah, 108 of the 133. But we'd best move on. I can sense my colleagues saying keep going. So Donald Trump and Keir Starmer have announced a significant trade deal aimed at reducing US tariffs on UK cars, aluminium and steel. The agreement, finalised on the 9th of July 2023, marks the first such deal following Trump's 90-day tariff pause. The deal comes after weeks of negotiations between the UK and US officials, with key elements focused on lowering tariffs on British steel. Yeah, I think we've got mixed up on a date there. Forgive us, but I'll keep going. The deal key elements focused on in the deal are lowering tariffs on British steel, aluminium and cars, vital exports to the US market. The announcement is seen as a response to pressures on the US economy, with Trump highlighting the creation of an aluminium and steel trading zone, as well as secure pharmaceutical supply chains. The deal also opens the door to future partnerships in technology, including advancements in AI, bioengineering and quantum physics. The UK government has faced scrutiny over the deal's potential to include controversial concessions, such as tax cuts for US tech firms and potential changes to online safety laws. However, UK ministers have insisted the deal does not alter food standards, including the import of chlorine-washed chicken and hormone-treated beef, which have been a point of contention in past trade talks and are talking up. UK beef farmers are set to gain exclusive access to the US market. While the deal has been hailed as a breakthrough, it remains under close scrutiny. The UK government has been reticent over democratic oversight, and ministers have signalled that further negotiations, particularly regarding pharmaceuticals and the film industry, are ongoing. There are calls for the UK Parliament that they should have a vote on the final terms of any trade deal, ensuring transparency and accountability. Maureen, that question about a vote in Parliament, there doesn't have to be a vote. I believe. Do you think MPs should be given a chance to debate this and have a vote on it?
I think they should be given a chance to have a debate on it. Whether it would need to come to a vote, I don't know. But in any case, the government could ignore it, and I don't know whether they would want to take the risk of having a vote. I don't think it's usual, but clearly there is a call for it. I think my main worry would be exactly what the terms are over beef imports from the US and how it's going to be monitored in terms of making sure it's not hormone grown beef. They don't, as far as I'm aware, in fact, I'm nearly sure they don't have the same tracing of beef and cattle and where it comes from that we have in this country. And, I'm sure there will be a market for our beef, which is very high quality in the US. But my fear would be dumping of US beef on the markets here at home, and that would be the worst of all worlds. In terms of, the devil is obviously in the detail, and we haven't seen all the detail. But in terms of cars, it looks like a a pretty good deal. There's no tariffs on the first 100,000 vehicles per year, and I think there's something like 105 or 110,000 sold. So that looks like a pretty good deal. But as I say, we haven't had time. It was only this afternoon, and we haven't really had time to scrutinise it in detail. But both governments are hailing it as a success, and clearly Stammer thinks he's on a roll because he did a deal with India a few days ago, and now this, and hoping for one with the EU. So, what effect it has on Trump's mission to get everything made in the US, I'm not very sure. I think we'll have to wait and see.
And apparently, it's not a full trade deal, as you say. It's to do with certain sectors. But apparently, Scotch whisky's not included, and the NFU are apparently also, the National Farmers Union are also concerned about what's going to be happening with beef. Do you think this means that is Scotland an afterthought when it came to this trade deal?
Well, I've heard that Scotch whisky was getting a 10% tariff, but I may have misheard.
No, I think
Um,
that's correct. I mean, the 10% tariff is still in place, but it's not getting an exemption with this trade deal.
well, you wonder whether the UK government pressed for an exemption. I doubt very much. That won't have been one of their main priorities, will it? I mean, it's clear that Stammer heard up the whatever road it is to a car factory, Halesowen at Birmingham, so it must have been the M6 or whatever. No, wrong one.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it was in
to
Preston,
get
wasn't it? I
to
think.
get a, to be able to make the announcement at a car factory. So clearly, cars are more important to him than beef and whiskey.
Yeah. So we'd best move on. The Bank of England, thank you, Maureen. The Bank of England has cut interest rates by 0.25 percentage points to 4.25%. Its fourth reduction since last August in response to rising economic uncertainty and a forecasted slowdown in UK growth. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee, or MPC, warned that the UK economy would grow by just 0.3% over the next 3 years, in addition to previous downgraded forecasts. The rate cut comes amid concerns over global economic uncertainty, particularly the impact of US trade policy and the potential for continued inflationary pressures. In a split vote, two members of the MPC called for a 0.5% cut, but the committee ultimately settled on a smaller reduction, signalling caution about future cuts. Financial markets are expecting at least two more quarter-point cuts in borrowing costs later this year, though some experts, such as the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, predict the bank will only implement one more cut in 2025 due to persistent inflation above the 2% target. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, acknowledged that inflationary pressures have eased, but highlighted the unpredictable nature of the global economy. The bank's latest quarterly forecast did not account for a potential trade deal between the UK and the US, which was confirmed shortly after the rate decision. The deal includes reduced tariffs on UK exports of cars, steel and aluminium, but the Chancellor has warned that the broader global slowdown will still affect the UK economy. The MPC also noted the potential impact of the recent increase in employer national insurance contributions, which could affect wages, employment and prices. However, the committee is more concerned about a spike in inflation due to higher council tax and utility bills. Despite the lower peak in inflation expected this year, the MPC does not anticipate reaching its 2% inflation target until 2027. The Trade Union Congress has called for more aggressive rate cuts to help ease pressures on households and businesses. So, Maureen, the only thing that I'm not an economist, the only thing I know about this sort of story is that a cut in interest rates is good if you've got a mortgage, but it's bad if you're a saver. But then maybe there aren't any savers left after years of austerity and the cost of living crisis. Do you think Rachel Reeves is going to get the smiles from the voters that she hopes that this cut is going to perhaps going to provide?
I think people are more interested in terms of the cost of living. I think people are more interested in the inflation rate, and I think the inflation rate for food is still pretty high, which is what affects most people's pockets day to day. So while this interest rate cut is welcome by the vast majority of people who have mortgages more than are affected more by mortgages perhaps than savings, I think this is a good move. But we will need to see what the next inflation figures are like. And I think, whereas in the past I've said that the Bank of England should be bolder in terms of rate cuts, I think at this point in time, it is important that it's smaller cuts more consistently, rather than big changes in the rate.
Thank you, Maureen. Over 40 Labour MPs have warned Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer that planned cuts to disability benefits are impossible to support, and have and have called for a change in direction before the vote next month. The letter signed by MPs from across the party highlights growing concerns over proposed changes, including tighter eligibility for personal independence payments, or PIP, and cuts to incapacity benefits for individuals deemed unfit for work. These measures are expected to save £5 billion annually, but would impact an estimated 700,000 families already living in poverty, according to the internal forecast from the Department of Work and Pensions, or the DWP. The letter criticises the proposed cuts, calling them the biggest attack on the welfare state since George Osborne's austerity measures. MPs argue that the changes will not create job opportunities, but will instead worsen hardship for vulnerable people. The MPs also stressed that the government strategy for addressing the benefits system is flawed, calling for a more comprehensive approach that includes tackling employment barriers and ensuring protections against discrimination. The Labour MPs from both the left and more centrist factions of the party are calling for a delay in decision-making process until full impact assessments on the cuts are conducted. They also want to see further engagement with disabled people's organisations to redesign the system in a way that provides greater support. The planned cuts, outlined in a government green paper, would involve significant changes to PIP eligibility and the freezing or cutting of incapacity benefits for new claimants. In addition, people under 22 would no longer be eligible for a health top-up of universal credit under these proposed plans. These changes have sparked widespread concern among Labour MPs, with some suggesting the party cannot support the proposals without further review. Downing Street has already faced significant opposition within its ranks. Following the general election in July, 7 Labour MPs were suspended from the party's whip after voting in favour of an SNP amendment to scrap the two-child benefit limit. Maureen, I think that reminder about the SNP amendment to scrap the two-child cap that led to 7 Labour MPs being removed from the whip is important. Do you think, will there be any Scottish Labour MPs who have joined that, signed that letter?
I to find out if any of the people who signed it were from Scotland. I haven't seen the list yet.
Perhaps one of our colleagues could maybe do a quick web search, maybe while we're unpacking
this. In any case, I hear my dudes, actually, but that they would stand out from the crowd, apart from Brian, I've forgotten his second name.
Leishman,
yeah, he might have, because he's been pretty vocal about many things, including Grangemouth. But, I don't know if this is going to make any difference to Starmer. He said he's not going to change his mind on anything, and they have a big majority. I noticed too, interestingly, that Stephen Flynn has asked Stammer to come up and canvass in Hamilton Stonehouse and Lark Hall um, for the by-election for Labour and hear the concerns of the constituents there. But I understand he's not expected to come and help in the by-election. And I think that in itself tells you a lot about how he feels he's going down in Scotland. I don't know if Anna Sarwar has told him to stay away or not. But I thought Stephen Flynn was right in making that call.
Um, just quickly, are the cuts going to happen in Scotland, Maureen? Or is
As far
Scot-
as I'm so well, in terms of the devolved benefits, it will, we have our own benefits, so um,
is it going to be
it shouldn't
mitigated?
affect
Or
Scotland, but it depends on budgetary pressures, I suppose.
I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering if it was something that the Scottish Government was already planning to mitigate. I've got a little mental block on it at the moment.
Well, so employment and support allowance isn't devolved, and adult disabilities is devolved. So I'm not sure of all of them, but I know one is devolved and one is not. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, so let me just feed that. So let me just feed that to the listeners who won't be able to hear that. So benefits are devolved to Scotland, so the cuts won't be coming to here directly, and so okay. Maybe put something on the website after. Maureen, can you explain that maybe better than I can? I'm stumbling over that.
Yeah, so universal credit is still a Westminster-based um, uh, um, payment, and um, you know, everybody's the government, the UK government is trying to move everybody onto universal credit. So, if, for example, you have employment and support allowance now, that might they're gradually being moved over to universal credit. So I suppose anything kind of work related unemployment is still with Westminster. In terms of payments that are related to disability, like adult disability and personal independent payments, that is devolved to the Scottish Government, as far as I'm aware.
And so therefore they probably won't be happening here, but maybe there's going to be Barnett consequentials. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, moving on, tensions between nuclear-armed India and Pakistan, both countries have nuclear arms, have escalated sharply, with both nations accusing each other of drone and missile attacks, raising fears of further conflict following the deaths of 31 people in Indian missile strikes on Pakistan. The violence, which began in the early hours of Wednesday, follows India's missile retaliation against Pakistan after an attack on Indian-administered Kashmir in late April, which killed 25 Hindu tourists. India has accused Pakistan of direct involvement in the attack through militant groups it has allegedly supported. In response, Pakistan claims to have shot down 25 Indian drones over various cities, including Rawalpindi, and accused India of sending drones over Pakistan military headquarters. Pakistan also reported casualties, including 4 soldiers injured in a confrontation and a civilian death in Sindh. India, in return, reported thwarting attempts by Pakistan to launch drones and missiles at 15 military targets, including those in Amritsar, Srinagar, and Chandigarh, with its air defence systems intercepting the attacks. India also claimed it had neutralised Pakistan's air defence system near Lahore. Despite these claims, Pakistan denied launching any strikes, calling Indian reports fake news and warning of an upcoming retaliation. The missile strikes by India were the most extensive against Pakistan in decades, targeting sites in Pakistan's Punjab region and sparked sparked heightened military alerts in both countries. India's border states of Rajasthan and Punjab were placed on high alert, with schools shut near the border and mock drills conducted in preparation for any further attacks. Pakistan declared a state of emergency in hospitals along the Sindh region border and cancelled medical staff leave. Despite both sides accusing each other of provocations, the situation remains volatile, with diplomatic efforts underway to mediate the conflict. Iranian and Saudi officials have intervened, offering to mediate as the international community calls for de-escalation to avoid a wider military confrontation between the two nuclear powers. In Holyrood today, First Minister John Swinney expressed support for Scotland's Indian and Pakistani communities in light of the recent tensions. He wrote to the conveners of the Scottish Parliament's cross-party groups on India and Pakistan, offering his thoughts to those with family in the region. He called for dialogue and diplomacy over military escalation, emphasising the importance of protecting civilians. Swinney's office is also in contact with various community stakeholders and agencies, including Police Scotland and Universities Scotland, urging continued dialogue to support Scotland's Indian and Pakistani communities during this uncertain time. Maureen, this fight over Kashmir dates back to when India was partitioned by the UK, and both Pakistan and India claim that Kashmir should be part of their countries. Every now and again I've seen Free Kashmir sprayed on a wall somewhere, and I know that Nehru promised a referendum to the people of Kashmir in the 1950s, but it never happened, possibly offering them independence. So do you think devolution or independence is really the solution here? And if so, what are the chances that that's going to happen?
Oh, as you say, it's been disputed territory since uh, uh, India and Pakistan became independent countries, and there have been skirmishes off and on since those times. Although this seems to go further than in Kashmir itself, and other states in both Pakistan and India have been affected. So perhaps has escalated more quickly to other parts than we thought it would, and especially now because of the use of drones in against countries. It obviously is likely to escalate more quickly. I think it is important for some country to begin mediation talks immediately. And I've seen suggested that some of the Arab states who have relations with both sides may be best placed to do that. I don't think it should always have to be the United States or the EU or the UK. I think, we've seen the efforts of the Arab countries to mediate over Gaza, and I think they should be the ones who step in my opinion, step in and try and get this resolved quickly. But I don't know what the resolution might be. I'm not sure if Kashmir has enough resources to be an independent country. It clearly would have to, as you say, have a referendum. I haven't heard that mentioned, but maybe I don't know whether it could be guaranteed to take place in safe and peaceful circumstances. So I'm sure we'll be coming back to this topic.
Yes, and as well as it is a territorial dispute, but of course religion seems to make it more complicated with Islamism and Hinduism. But I've got the list of MPs, just harking back to the previous story about the Labour MPs. As far as I can tell, the only Scottish Labour MP to have signed the list, the only name that I can recognise is Brian Leishman. I think the rest all are probably English, but we'll double check. So the next item is Police Scotland has arrested around 100 individuals and seized over 200 kilograms of illegal drugs in a year-long operation targeting a nationwide organised crime group operating from Dumfries to Tayside. Operation Intensity, which began in May 2023, was led by Police Scotland's Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit and aimed at disrupting a criminal network believed to be exploiting vulnerable individuals in some of the country's most deprived areas. Officers acted on intelligence suggesting the group used car couriers and safe houses to run drug supply lines. Over the course of the operation, police executed 46 search warrants across multiple divisions, recovering large quantities of illegal substances, including cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, cannabis and illicit pills. Significant seizures included 12 kilograms of cocaine on the M74 and more in Leshmahago. Smaller hauls were in Glasgow, Clydebank, Broxburn and Uddingston. In addition to drugs, officers confiscated more than £600,000 in cash, a handgun, an air weapon, a BB gun and ammunition. As part of the operation, 11 children identified as being at risk due to the gang's activities were safeguarded and referred to partner agencies or placed with family members. The operation involved coordination between national units and local police divisions, with enforced activity taking place in both urban and rural areas. The operation forms part of Police Scotland's ongoing work with the Serious Organised Crime Task Force, which brings together multiple agencies to tackle serious and organised criminal threats across the country. The force is encouraging members of the public with concerns about drugs for criminal activities in their communities to contact Police Scotland or report anonymously through Crime Stoppers. Maureen, I'm sure you can imagine the relief that people living in these communities must be feeling after this news, and also about the children involved. But do you think, is there anything else that the Scottish Government could do to make it easier or to aid this kind of process for Police Scotland?
Well, I think Police Scotland have done a sterling job here, obviously cracking down on this gang that operates in so many places in Scotland. I think, we talk about multi-agency approaches, and you mentioned that safe houses were often used where there are vulnerable people in them. I think the word is cuckold, isn't it? And that definitely happens. And I think, social services and other organisations should be aware of that when they are dealing with people who have disabilities and are vulnerable. So I think, a multi-agency approach is useful to the police in this, in particular in gathering intelligence. But this has been a huge operation. The sad thing is, though, that if one gang's taken down, there's always someone else willing and able to move into that space and continue supplying drugs for those who have a drug habit. So it's the job of government, I think, to try, as well as stop the supply, is to help people stay away from drugs, and that's the kind of education service, and also the health service to get people off drugs. And it'll be interesting to see, in terms of the consumption unit, how many people they manage to, when they're in there, talk to them to take another path.
Thank you, Maureen. And the next item is, with 4 weeks until polling day, SNP candidate Katie Loudon has urged voters in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse to back her on the 5th of June by-election, citing recent Scottish Government policies aimed at supporting local services and households. Loudon, standing for the Scottish Parliament seat, framed the vote as a chance for constituents to express dissatisfaction with Labour and to support a government focused on targeting public investment. In the open letter to residents, she pointed to policies announced in the Scottish Government's latest programme for government as evidence of continued support for the area. Key measures highlighted include an additional 150,000 NHS appointments and procedures, 100,000 more GP appointments by March 2026, and the reinstatement of the winter fuel payment. The Scottish Government has also confirmed it will continue free prescriptions, university tuition and bus travel for under 22s and over 60s, alongside scrapping peak rail fares. Loudon said these decisions demonstrated the Scottish Government's commitment to easing household costs and protecting core public services. She contrasted this with recent changes affecting South Lanarkshire under Labour-led local administrations, citing the withdrawal of school bus access for over 8,000 children and the previous removal of winter fuel support for thousands of pensioners. In her appeal to voters, Loudon positioned the SNP as offering a clear alternative for those who feel let down by other parties and pledged to represent the interests of the constituency in Holyrood if elected. She also warned of wider political shifts, expressing concern about the rise in support for right-wing figures, and called on residents to support what she described as a more hopeful and community-focused path forward. The Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election is scheduled to take place on Wednesday the 5th of June. Maureen, I was wondering, is an open letter by a candidate, is that an unusual ploy to take? And as you're president of the SNP, I was wondering if maybe you had a wee hand in this strategy. Would you be able to explain it a wee bit for us?
So I've not had a hand in this. Clearly, there's a local election agent and team who will be running things pretty much from the constituency, perhaps with some input and help from Party HQ. I haven't been down yet, but I intend to go this weekend and see for myself how things are going and see if I can contribute to the campaign. But I think, letters to constituents, sometimes to particular groups or to people you've identified as supporters, or more widely, is pretty standard, and perhaps it just hasn't formed a press release, if you like, before, but. All sorts of tactics are used, and I think given that we had the programme for government this week, it was an ideal opportunity to spread the word of what the SNP government has done and is doing for not just the constituents and the voters in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, but also more widely.
Thank you, Maureen. But I did watch the programme for government announcement the other day, and you were cited in that event. I think it's credited as being one of the people who came up with the idea to have every single SNP for Holyrood 2026. Yes, it's not the programme for government, I'm sorry, it was just the announcement of the start of the election for 2026, is that right? Maybe, but is the SNP the only party to have every candidate declared, and it's unusual to have it as much as a year in advance, is that right?
Well, one, I think we are the only party to have every constituency covered by a candidate this early on. It's always been a name for the party to get candidates in place as soon as possible. I remember when I was a candidate for Westminster in the 1979 election. I think I was chosen in 1975 or 76, so a long way out. So it is always a good idea to try and get candidates in place as soon as possible, because people like to rally round a candidate and canvass on behalf of a candidate as well as the party generally, and it's someone who can lead the troops, if you like.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. So the Scottish Government has announced that publicly owned Calmac ferries will be directly awarded the next Clyde and Hebrides ferry services contract, starting on the 1st of October 2025, and that follows a ministerial statement in Holyrood. The decision was confirmed by Transport Secretary Fiona Hislop in response to a parliamentary question. The move marks a shift away from a commercial tender process towards a public service model designed to give better designed to better reflect the needs of island communities served by the network. Under the new CHFS3 contract, the service will include a benefits realisation plan, revised performance indicators, enhanced monitoring, and increased regional management through dedicated area managers. These changes aim to make services more efficient, flexible, and community focused. The Scottish Government expects this direct award to support long-term improvements in reliability and resilience. Engagement is ongoing with staff, residents, businesses, local communities and trade unions to shape the final arrangements. The contract award follows the publication of the Islands Connectivity Plan, which outlines wider goals for strengthening transport links. As part of that strategy, 12 new vessels are being added to the fleet, and infrastructure investment continues across the network. Transport Scotland is now working with Calmac to prepare for the start of the new contract, and the Scottish Parliament will be kept updated on progress. Maureen, is this announcement going to be? I'm going to be blunt. Is this announcement going to be reported very much on mainstream media? And let's say when it is reported, is it going to stop people shouting ferries at the Scottish Government?
It's not going to stop the BBC in Scotland, I don't think, from shouting ferries as well. I think the direct award of the contract is a good thing. It gives stability and clarity going forward, and gives the islanders some peace of mind. I remember the last time the contract went out to tender, it was a very upsetting time for those involved and who rely on the ferries. Clearly, you can see our detractors wanting to relate it to ferries, the ships themselves. But there is a clear plan in place now for the replacement of ferries. It's not something. It's something that landed on a Scottish Government's desk in 2007, because there hadn't been a rolling programme of replacements before that. So, to get it into sync that you're getting over a 30-year lifespan of a ferry, rolling over that years and replacement over the years, it's important to have so many ferries each year. So I think that is coming on track. I think Fiona Hislop, as Transport Secretary, is doing a great job in this, and clearly getting all the ducks in a row in terms of her portfolio, which is great.
And the item it mentions something about moving away from a kind of a private sector contract system to something that kind of almost sounded like it was edging towards nationalisation. But certainly it's a long-term aim or long-term planning. But do you think maybe at some point that might be what the Scottish Government might be hoping that is going to happen, that we're going to nationalise the ferries?
Well, the ferries are, to all intents and purposes, nationalised. I mean, Calmac and Caledonian McBrain are government owned, as far as I'm aware, and it is government. Well, it's not directly government run. I think that is the difference. There's maybe too many players in the field. There's Transport Scotland, Caledonian McBrain, and then Calmac. And there's more than just the ferries, as you've mentioned. There's the development and the sorry, yes, CMAL. Although it's called, the new one is direct award to Clyde and Hebridean ferry services. So I just wondered if there's a change of name there. But in any case, there's not just the ferries, there's all the ports and the slipways and all that kind of stuff that needs investment as well. We've seen the new Glen Sannock's not able to go to Ardrossan, and it has to go to Troon. But that's a different thing because Ardrossan port is privately owned. So yes, there's a lot of other things besides the actual ships that need to be dealt with by the contract.
Thank you for clearing that up, Maureen. I'm happy to show my ignorance so that people like yourself can then take the opportunity to put me right. So at Holyrood today, MSPs joined people all across Europe to mark Victory in Europe Day, when the Allied forces commanders accepted the unconditional surrender of the Nazi High Command, ending the war in Europe and the rule of that fascist regime. In remembrance of all those who lost their lives in the Second World War, we will end tonight's programme with the flowers of the forest. But Maureen, thank you for your time this evening and for staying late with us after this late start. So that's it for this evening. So thank you and good night. Do you want to do? Shall I do the appeal?
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome.
Hello. So just a technical hitch there in the control room. So we're hoping to go to the music as suggested.